Even with a display upgrade, the iPhone 17 might not be as good as the iPhone 17 Pro. According to display rumors, the base versions of the iPhone 17 series will get a significant screen improvement this year. However, a recent assertion made by Weibo leaker digital chat station raises doubts about the quality of this update. DCE's latest article, which has been translated, asserts that the iPhone 17 series will feature high refresh rates across the board. In answer to a commenter's inquiry regarding the regular iPhone 17, DCES advises lowering your expectations appropriately, a warning that hasn't been included in prior rumors. It has long been rumored that the iPhone 17 will be the first non-Pro model to include a 120Hz display. However, according to DCES, the iPhone 17's, and most likely the iPhone 17 Air's, 120Hz screen will not be the same as that of the iPhone 17 Pro and iPhone 17 Pro Max. This may indicate that the more battery-efficient adaptive promotion refresh rate found in the Pro models will not be available on the iPhone 17. An alternative is that the iPhone 17's display refresh rate will be increased, but to a lower value, such as 90 Hz. Although not as much as a Pro model, that would provide some extra smoothness over the existing basic iPhones. It still sounds like the end of 60Hz iPhones is inevitable, regardless of what happens, and given that the great majority of Android phones, regardless of budget, switched to high refresh rate screens years ago, it's not a minute too soon. In the iPhone 16 series, the A19 Pro is expected to have a 3nm chipset, similar to the A18 and A18 Pro CPUs. However, it will score more than 4,000 points on the Geekbench 6 single-core CPU benchmark and more than 10,000 on the multi-core version. If DCES figures are accurate, the iPhone 17 Pro would have at least a 15% power boost over the previous model, as the iPhone 16 Pro managed 3,400 and 8,391 on Geekbench 6 during our tests. Although this title frequently switches between the newest Android flagship phones and Apple phones, it would also probably make the iPhone 17 Pro the most powerful phone available when it launches. Check out our hubs for the most recent leaks and advice on the iPhone 17, iPhone 17 Air, iPhone 17 Pro, and iPhone 17 Pro Max. Next, I've had an iPhone since the beginning, and these are the 7 features of iOS 26 that I'm most eager to test out. There are some interesting enhancements in this year's iPhone software upgrade. With iOS 26, the iPhone software upgrade that Apple introduced this week at Worldwide Developer Conferences 2025, there are many new opportunities to check out. However, like any update, some of the new iOS features are more noticeable than others. Even if you are able to download the iOS 26 developer beta, it is just not feasible at this time. Any beta at this early stage is certain to be a touch rough around the edges, but it might offer you a taste of what's to come when the full release comes later this year. Nevertheless, from what Apple has so far demonstrated, I'm excited to test out a few features during the beta phase. It's interesting to note that none of them are particularly related to the liquid glass interface redesign, which is the focal point of all of Apple's software updates this year. That reflects the nature of software interfaces in part. You can only learn so much about a new interface by looking at stills and hype films. You have to use the software yourself to get a feel for how it looks. Furthermore, if Apple is doing its job well, using software that was inspired by liquid glass shouldn't be all that different from the interface you've grown accustomed to over the past 10 years. Rather, the enhancements to iOS 26 that have caught my eye are those that aim to improve on already existing capabilities. These, in my opinion, are the adjustments that will enhance your iPhone experience if they live up to the hype. Currently, I use the live voicemail feature ruthlessly and often, sending any unfamiliar caller straight to voicemail while I wait for the on-screen transcript to verify that it's a snake oil salesman call so I can safely disregard it. However, iOS 26's new call screening feature promises to take care of that step for me. Unlike live voicemail, which requires you to hit a button, call screening allows your phone to answer unfamiliar calls on your behalf. Following the caller's name and purpose for calling, the phone rings and displays the information on the screen. After that, you can choose whether or not to answer the phone. Call screening should lessen the effort required to avoid spam calls if it performs as promised. Robocalls should ideally be ignored entirely, since if they start their spiel right away, the recipient won't be able to follow the instructions to state their name and company. The phone app is just one part of the screening process. In addition, iOS 26's Messages feature has screening tools that allow you to relegate unknown senders to a different tab from chats with individuals you know and trust. After that, you may review that list whenever you'd like and determine which messages should be displayed on the app's homepage and which ones should be sent to the land of ghosts and wind. A similar filtering capability will be added to recent calls in the FaceTime and phone applications. I belong to several group chats, including ones with my personal family, a group of friends from my neighborhood, and a handful of friends with whom I co-produce a podcast. We occasionally have to make decisions on things like when we'll get together for drinks, when we'll record our next podcast, or what kind of takeout each of us wants to have that night. In the chats, that usually leads to a lot of back and forth as everyone shares their thoughts, and it seems like it takes a lot longer to come to an agreement than it should. For this reason, when Apple began discussing the polling function that will soon be available in group chats and messages, my ears perked up. It makes sense that it would bring some order to the mayhem that may break out anytime everyone in the group wants to voice their opinions. It sounds like polls and messages operates just as you would expect. People in your group chat vote on a list of possibilities you present, and their chat avatar shows next to the choice they made. Additionally, anyone may add their own option to the poll using the Add Choice tool, so don't worry about someone feeling left out because their choice was never even taken into account. Whether it's adding details to your schedule or researching more information about a certain object, the aim of any on-device AI is to make it aware of the facts on your screen so that it can take action. As Apple works to improve the intelligence of its digital assistant, it is actually one of the main obstacles to updating Siri at the moment. Although the redesign of Siri might not be ready until 2026, iOS 26 will introduce context awareness in a different way thanks to new features in visual intelligence, the AI-powered tool that has made your iPhone's camera a search tool. Those visual intelligence capabilities are extended to screenshots with iOS 26. When you notice something on the screen that attracts your attention when using a social networking app or website, take a screenshot, activate visual intelligence, and allow the tool to search for further details about that specific item or object. You also have a button that can turn any information about the date, time, and location into a calendar entry. Since you still need to take some action, this isn't complete context awareness. However, visual intelligence is now a more practical tool that isn't just dependent on the iPhone's camera thanks to its expanded capabilities. Not all operating system modifications must be drastic in order to be beneficial. Occasionally, a small adjustment can have a significant impact. That's what I think Apple Music's new pinning function will bring. Playlists, albums, and artists can be pinned in iOS 26 and will show up at the top of the Music app's library. Because it's such a basic function, Apple merely mentions it in passing at the Worldwide Developer Conference keynote and doesn't even hint at it on its iOS 26 preview website. Nevertheless, it's the first thing I'll listen to just before I work out and need to call upon a certain song to get motivated. If you were curious, the song is My Favorite Mutiny by The Coop. Traveling is undoubtedly more convenient now that the Wallet app offers digital boarding cards, as you don't have to worry about managing paper tickets. You can board by simply flashing your iPhone at the gate. But instead of just making those boarding cards convenient, iOS 26 will make them more functional. With your boarding card, Apple promises to provide you with access to airport maps. Additionally, you will be able to identify your luggage using the Find My Location tracking features. Whether someone is picking you up at the airport or simply wants to know that you've landed safely, boarding passes will also connect to live activities, which will allow you to communicate your flight arrival status with them. Greater control over sleeping. I'm not above pressing the snooze button when my iPhone's wake-up alarm goes off every morning. However, I might not mind changing the amount of time I can sleep before the alarm goes off again. With iOS 26, that will be an option. Apple claims to be changing the clock app so that users can customize the snooze times of their alarms. This would undoubtedly give users more freedom than they now have. In iOS 18, the 9-minute snooze time is fixed. You can only toggle the snooze feature on or off. Depending on how much more sleep you want to get, you can actually change the snooze time on alarm clocks from 1 to 15 minutes. I enjoy traveling to new locations and finding eateries, attractions, and other interests that I may discuss with people or keep to myself. Although a feature that will be included in Maps in iOS 26 aims to eliminate some of the guesswork, the challenge is in remembering the precise name or location. Wherever you go with Maps, Visited Places serves as a sort of storage vault, with locations recorded by city and category, restaurants, natural landmarks, and other places you've encountered on your travels. I no longer need to recall the name or exact street of the taco joint I went to in Los Angeles, which is a few blocks from the California Science Center. It should be listed in Maps thanks to Visited Places. At this time, it's unclear if you'll be able to flag a location in the Maps app, or if Visited Places would just record the places you receive directions to. However, testing out iOS 26 and seeing how all these new features function will be part of the enjoyment. So, that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more tech news and updates.